the doctrine of creation and evolution go together?
Well, I don't know. I'll be honest with you.
That's fair.
That's a good question that we may not be resolved. You look at DNA, you can see some things like that. If God chose to, some, I guess the creationists would say, create that in situ, that a fossil record was created on one of the days, God could do that. I really don't think, personally, I don't think that's the way it happened. I think actually what happened is God used this natural process that was part of the created order. In other words, there's something that's getting better and better about the way we are. And that's not to deny God's hand in that, but, you know, I don't see a pattern of evolution as being contrary or dismissive of God. I just think it speaks more to the complexity of God in human creation, or in the creation of everything. There has to be a divine spark. And what science does, in one sense, it presents the necessity of God for this all to work and to unfold the way it did. To say, but creation denies the existence of the process is wrong as well. I really think they're more affirmative than sometimes we give credit for, and I don't see it as a threat.
Yeah.
I see it as a compliment to the complexity and the immensity of God's creative power.
Yeah.
So, but I don't have the answer.
That's fair. Thank you.
One of the questions I get asked when I get there.
Perfect.
Yes.
Yeah. It's a question I'm going to be asking.
That God gave humans dominion over the earth. So, how should we interpret God giving humans dominion over the earth?
Yeah, I'm glad you asked that question too, because that's the other part of understanding creation that's so important to me. Dominion is not sense that I get to choose how to use or misuse it, but it's more, for me, it becomes a matter of stewardship. Or I can build a stronger relationship with them or appreciate them. Having dominion over the earth, to me, is, again, a choice. And I'm very much a Wesleyan in that sense. I believe in free will, but the choice is to use it well or to misuse it. But I think Scripture really points to the importance that these are gifts to be used for good, the earth. So having dominion over it carries with it a responsibility, certainly so that it's preserved for my well-being, but also for those around me as well that I do have a relationship with and a responsibility towards. So I can't misuse that and just say, yeah, but God said I can do whatever I want to with them. God gave me children, but He didn't say you can treat them any way you want to. He told me that I'm to love them and cherish them. They're a gift from the Lord.
Right.
Okay, well, my next question is, do you think God created only in the beginning, or do you think He's still creating?
Oh, I think He's still creating. That's part of the expansive understanding of the universe I love, is that it makes sense that God as the creator wouldn't just say, here you go, boom. To me, I think that part of what God creates is reflecting in His statement, behold, I make all things new. He recreates, makes new, and I would like to think that God is still creating.
Absolutely.
That, this is it, use it up and it's done. Doesn't quite make sense, but
No. If society views something as bad, do you think it has goodness in itself because God created it?
yeah, I think fundamentally everything is good. Not everything is used well. And that includes our own behavior. I think there are different reasons why there's bad behavior. Somebody could be unintentionally bad. There could be a mental illness, for instance, or an injury that causes that. And I think we have a responsibility to see that person differently. And I think there's people who choose to be bad, and so we have chosen to misuse creation, that is ourselves, our will, our relationship with others. So, if there's something bad going on, I think most of the time it's our choice. I can't say that all the time. There are things that are always confusing. You know, if a child is born with a birth defect, there may be a biological cause for that we can point to, but maybe not. And is that a malformation of creation? Is it bad? No, it's maybe beyond my understanding, but it doesn't mean that there's a flaw in God's creation. You know, that he kind of messes up sometimes or doesn't pay attention enough. I think that there's probably causes behind it, whether we understand them or not. I think what's more important is how we respond to that challenge. If a child is born without ability to see, then because he or she is part of God's creation, and it's incumbent upon me to help that child thrive as much as possible with visual impairment. What do I need to do to help that child see in a different way? It becomes a really important question. You were talking about this. I was a psychology major, and so I worked with developmentally disabled children. Back then it was called mental retardation, but there were different levels, and some of them were profoundly disabled. They could, you know, they basically were alive, but they had no communication. They didn't have any way of caring for themselves. Responses were very limited. But that's part of God's created order. And because of their inability to provide for themselves, my response wasn't to say, you know, God, you messed up, you're not very good to us, but to say this becomes our responsibility. This is part of creation, regardless of my perspective on it. And it didn't mean it hurt for that child at some point and wish for them something better. But what was more important is what I could provide for them that would make it better. It could be a hug, or make sure they got fed, or they had a safe place to be. In other words, if you have a mindset that sees creation as very important, everything in creation is important. No matter where they're from, whatever country or tradition or culture they're from, they're a child of God. And if they're struggling with something, what might I do to make it better?
Is there anything that we should ultimately fear? Do you believe?
I get scared from time to time, anxious, worried. Ultimately, no. I think part of what helps me in life is being able to come back around to a sense that no matter what happens, nothing can separate me from God's love. You know, Paul says that in Romans 8. Nothing in all of creation separates you from God's love. I really, really believe that. So ultimately, no. Episodically, I'll forget that. There'll be something that comes and will create anxiety, or I may be fearful. It may take me a while to come back around. And even if I forget it, it doesn't change it.
Right.
So security isn't dependent upon me feeling secure.
Right.
So I think it's really important.
Thank you.
Well,
Sorry, how is God engaged in the created world?
that's a really good question. I think we had an infinitely perfect, loving God who created out of the goodness, but loved us enough to give us freedom to use or misuse this creation. And I think always involved in creation, he's always going to be looking to take another walk with us and to remind us of really how we are created to be and what it means to be in his presence and to be loved and to love each other. So I don't think God is withdrawn or removed from creation. I think he's in it all the time. And I think that one of the great joys we have is when we realize that and wake up to that, everything changes. Because you're never alone. No matter what you face, you don't ever face it by yourself. And so there's a hope in that that goes well beyond. I could have been a slave in the 1830s, and if I understood that, my hope was not in the way my master was treating me or the injustice of what I was going through, but in that there's a loving God who created me and will not abandon me. And that there will be a release from this one day. Or if I'm dealing with poverty here in Polk County in 2014, that same hope is still there. Or as a pastor, who sometimes has very tragic situations that I'm facing. A family that's disintegrating, and your heart's breaking. My basic belief and premise is that God is involved in this. This brokenness doesn't mean God's absent. That's exactly where you will find God. And I think his heart breaks for us. But